Hello, Chris.
Hi, Paul. How's it going?
Oh, good. Yeah, I love that intro. Really, really enjoyable that to watch it, even though I've seen it 3 or 4 times. But yeah, you had a good week.
Yeah, just look busy as ever, mate. Yeah, busy as ever. But it's not. I tell you what, it's not getting any warmer, is it? I keep going out there thinking it's gonna get a little bit milder soon.
Yeah.
So what's it like on the East Coast? Well, obviously, it's probably horrible, is it?
Very cold. I mean, we went up. We would have been up there probably tonight, but I'm happy not to. But we've been up there a few times this week, and it's been absolutely freezing. It's sort of amplified because you've got that wind from North Sea just hitting you, and you're right on edge of it. But yeah, very cold, but not complaining. I've been out all week. Me and the Bobster, we've been doing our little jaunts, and yeah, I've enjoyed it, to be honest. It's been a good week. But see, we're building up in chat, so thanks for the support, guys. We've got Lorraine doing moderating, so all questions directed at Lorraine in capitals, please. And tonight it's all about you guys. Just your thoughts, your views. We'll kick it off. We'll talk about a few things, and just fill in the gaps, and we'll tell you what we think. But we want your opinions as well. So where we're going to go with this, Chris?
Yeah, well, it's like you say, it's just an interactive show tonight. Just a bit of banter, a few questions, and but we have between us, we have been sending out some emails for some interesting guests coming up. So yeah, we've got some really good ones coming up in the next few weeks and months. So that's something to keep an eye on, guys. And again, as ever, as Paul said, thank you for your support as usual. Do you know what? I was surprised by our latest couple of uploads about the big cat.
The big cat, yeah. I'm glad you've talked about that. And I'm sorry to cut across, but I'll tell you what I'd like to do, just before you jump into that, let's just have a look at a few people, because we're heading towards 70, 80 people in chat here, and we've got Awake, Tonya Morrison, Jojo, Mag Sue, Tino, Declan Walsh, Mike Disabled Welshman, Tom Waters, Alien Nate UK, Tonya Morrison, Dragonborn, Sober Carper, Rivington Pike Beast, we know who that is. Let's have a look, Zero Dawn. And obviously, I can only see a small number there, people. Oh, Bridget Van den Bosch, Simon Riley. We just love support, guys. Thank you. And if you've not pressed like, subscribe, please consider doing it. As I say every time, it's completely free, and it just gives us a little bit more incentive to keep pushing forward doing these. Big Shooter. We've done Tonya Morrison. We've done it twice now. So sorry, Chris. You want about the cats?
Yeah, just a great reaction to our latest couple of uploads. Really, over 30,000 views on that on the one before last. And the amount of people. And we already knew that these cats were out there, and we already knew that there were witnesses everywhere. And that if you read that comment section, it is just littered with people that have seen it or know someone that have seen one.
Yeah.
So maybe this is more common than I actually thought. Now, I've seen some really low numbers about, I've been reading some stuff on the net today, just catching up with how many these experts think. Now, we got to realize that whatever's out there on the internet is heavily influenced. And I don't think they really, one, maybe they don't know, and two, they probably don't want to say how many big cats are actually out there. But it appears to me there's a lot more than I first thought. Have you heard anything about the numbers?
I think there's a lot more, but I think a lot of time we know that wildlife and protection officers are doing a great job. As RSPCA do a great job, but a lot of time I don't think they get to kind of locations that I'm getting in. But we aren't going into detail. I've been talking twice today with wildlife protection officers about different things, and nothing about the paranormal, but about things that I've found. And they've called me once as well. So I'm not saying they're not doing a great job, but their resources are limited.
And, for sure.
When they're driving about, I mean, who's got the time to spend hours and hours in bits of woodland and bits of forest? Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you come across things quite by accident. So I think these cats, they're a lot more prevalent than people realize. And I think it shows, like you just said, the comments in the chat. Myself and Les on Truth Proof put a big cat one out, probably, I don't know, October time last year, and that's got massive views. So it shows the appetite. And I wonder, Obviously, everybody in chat, you guys, we love the support. But I wonder if the big cats obviously it's crossed the boundary and it's more mainstream. And I wonder if that's why it's getting a few more views, because there's people who also aren't interested in paranormal phenomena and unexplained phenomena. They're watching it as well. You know,
right. Yeah, I mean, Andy's just saying there, Alienet UK. Andy's just saying, that he's seen one, and that what he's saying there, 2.5 foot tall, prominent tail. Yeah, it just fits what everybody else has been saying in the comments, and I definitely. Do you know what? I'm torn between. I did feel a little bit guilty because there are a few comments in there. Just you should never read the negative comments, should you? But they weren't negative. They're just saying, look. You're kind of highlighting the situation here. These may well come at risk, and I did feel a little bit guilty about that. So,
well, I don't. No, not at all. And not out of cockiness or some kind of boast. But these cats are so elusive and I'm actively going to places where other people aren't walking, trying to see them, and I'm not seeing them. So me highlighting it, come on. I think most of the people that are saying those things are probably sat watching Emmerdale Farm. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that we're putting anything at risk. I mean, the golfers that saw the cat late last year on the Links golf course, it were an husband and wife that I went and spoke to, and I've got permission to go onto the course and speak to him. And he put his golf trolley and set up exactly where they'd seen it from in this long grass. And he knew what he was looking at. This guy, retired gentleman, and he said, this thing, the grass were long. And it were looking at us. It's got its head above the grass. We could see its back. And I'm watching it. It's watching me. I think he said for about 45 seconds. So I know that we're going to get people saying, why didn't you take a picture? He didn't. I'll tell you now, when I went up and met with him, he'd got a Nikon camera with him in his golf bag if he should see it again. And so it's there. So we've got a question there, Chris.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's obviously relevant to both of us and the phenomena we're discussing. So, yeah, I've frequented both, and I would have said just the number of reports that come in to Bempton, I would say it's a lot more, and there's varied phenomena there, but I think Bempton is just more active, in my opinion.
It is, but who asked the question? Sorry, anyway, but whoever asked the question,
Annie French Boyton,
Annie, it's not a competition anyway. If things happen at Winter Hill or if things happen in Sheffield, it's all relevant. It's all interesting. I'm just plucking a name out of thin air there. I know that, but it's all relevant because I believe, Annie, that a lot of places are equally as active as anywhere that I'm looking into or where Chris is looking or Steve Mera, and all the people who are looking into things at Winter Hill. But they just don't have that interest, the concentration of people that are wanting to invest time in these areas. I don't think an area becomes prominent because of an investigator. There's still areas that produce a high level of unexplained phenomena. But I still think there's areas out there that are just as active. They're just waiting for somebody to start getting the teeth into it and spending time. Who's going to spend time up on them cliff tops in between 7 and 11 and 1 in the morning? It's freezing. We were up there this week. One thing happened, and if he's in chat, Linny, I don't know whether he is. He is. I can see him. Right. Hi, Chris.
Yeah,
so I know what happened with Linny, and it involved his back. So watch the comments, people, and he'll probably put on what happened. So it's not a ghost, it's not a UFO, but there's this weird things happen up there. He'll punch it into chat in a bit. If not,
no, you're totally right, Paul. I mean, even with the Winter Hill, I mean, Mick McLaren is probably at the moment the most prominent researcher up there, I would have said. And even Mick, he says he works all week, so he really only gets up there Friday, Saturday, and so that means you've got 5 days where no one's up there, no one's looking, and really anyone that is up there is not interested in this phenomena, and they're not recording this phenomena. They're doing weird things up there.
And so all we're doing. I mean, Linny, we're up there. He comes up as much as I go up there. I mean, I've been all over the place in day this week, but he's got a lot on. Just saying, but he comes up there on an evening just as long as I'm up there, and we're not in the grand scheme of things. It's just a snapshot. There's there's 24 hours in a day, and we're just up there, a snapshot of those number of hours, aren't we? And the 7 days in a week. Just multiply it. So a lot of the time we're getting reports from people, not just in that area, who say, did you see? We're up there trying to see the light form phenomena, and we've got people, a couple of weeks ago, saying they'd seen them in Whitby, which is like 25, 30 miles up coast, well, more, saying they'd seen them down near Mouth at Humber, so they've been seen all over. So we're there. We did see the lights. We actually saw the light forms, and we some interesting observations here. And I hope I didn't touch on this. Hi guys, I got pushed in my back, and he did. There were me. Mark weren't up there. Oh, Mark was there. There's two Marks. So there was me. There were Mark Sturdy, and Mark stood in between us. And suddenly, Linny just turned around and kind of gave me a bit of an hard look, and he goes, "Did you just push me back?" Well, I weren't close enough to push him in back. Do you know what? And you saw him go forward, and he looked round, and something had pushed him in the back. That's not unusual. Pete will be probably watching this. Pete, who's just had his heart operation, who comes up there with us. And we were talking about some on cliff tops. I don't know, we went to middle of last year, and Ian were talking about something. And when Ian had stopped, Pete come over to me, says, when he were talking about that, because he's not secretive, Pete, and if he's listening, he'll know what I mean. He's real private with things that he talks about, and he'll tell Ian things as well. But he's trust with Pete. He's really, he builds up a friendship, and then it's a proper friendship. Do you know what I mean? He said, something pushed me back. Ian's wife were up there a couple of months since. Something pushed her in back. It's weird. So what do you call that then? Come on, I'm asking you guys in chat. Is that paranormal? What is that? It's invisible. We get those names called. All sorts of things.
Well, that's interesting, because that kind of brings us to a short that we're making at the moment between us, aren't we, about the Shadow Man? Because there's been a couple of sightings up in Winterhill that Mick McLaren's taken, in one in Roddlesworth, and your ongoing situation with whatever it is that you've seen it, Lenny's seen it. I think, did you say Jeremy's seen it?
Jeremy's. We've all seen it, and we haven't just seen it on our own. And apologies, because I know there's some truth proof people in here as well, but you're not just truth proof now. Your last transmission, so we value that support. But what I'm saying is, some of this I'm repeating. Philip Kinsella were up there. My eldest daughter Sarah, knows Philip and Ron, and she came up to spend a few hours on cliff tops with them. More to speak with them than actually go look at unexplained phenomena. Darkness, you're looking out, you can see about 25 foot in front of you, because maybe 30 foot, and there's a white board. So that's giving you a gauge. Suddenly, Philip and Sarah erupted at the same time. God, did you see it? Did you see that? Did you? And a figure, just a black figure, walked across the path. They saw him. Brett, I shouldn't call him Brett Biro Artist, but that's what he does. We need to display his artwork on here so people realise what we're talking about, because it's incredible.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But he went up there, said he saw a figure, a dark shape of just the outline of a figure walk across path. He knew nothing of any of this. Carl Dan, I don't know whether Carl's in chat, but Carl's seen it. We've all seen it. Myself and Pete saw it twice. Mick Sigson's seen it. Linny's seen it. And it's, for all intents and purposes, it's the shape of a man, but it's just blackness walking. It's really strange. So you're talking about, what are they, Chris? Or what the people in chat think they are?
Well, it kind of when you, I mean, obviously I didn't. The first start, not well, I'd heard about it before, but the first time I proper heard of it was when I came up with Brett, and on that evening when he saw it that night, when Lenny were up there, you were up there, and it kind of made me think about the psychic medium that you had up there that talked about the man who was, remember, he was carving, he had this vision of this creepy looking guy carving this ball out. Tell us about that.
He came in chat last night, funnily enough, and I'm really hoping that he comes back up. they call him Mark. So if he comes in chat, I'll say you're in now. And this guy would be the guy to get on here, even if he wanted to go on off camera and tell us about it. But he came up with his sister and his sister's partner, and I knew Jane. We'd exchanged loads of messages, and she'd been interested in truth proof books, but I didn't know Mark or George. But they came up. They're up there on a night, and I didn't know that Mark was a medium. He's not a medium that would go out and do readings and work this what is it? This talent, this gift. He's just, he has these attributes, and he's up there, and he suddenly stepped away from railings, and he didn't want to go near them. And we I want to keep channel safe, so I don't want to say too much, but there's a few people get suggestions in the mind when they stood near edge at railings, and he didn't like it, so he moved away. He didn't like what he was being told or what were being suggested to him. And he said, and his sister Jane said, "Are you all right?" Or words to that effect. If you're in chat, Jane, you correct me. And he said, "I don't normally get negative. I don't normally pick anything negative up." He says, "But I am doing here." He says, "And it's just not what I do." He says, "I don't feel it." And he'd not come up and told me you were into this at all. And he's talking, and he says, "There's a man beside you." I said, "What?" He said, "There's a little man beside you." He says, and his fingers are all kind of long and bent, and he just looks horrible, and he's grinning. He's got a really sinister grin on his face. Now, I do realise, people, that we're taking people at their word, and I could stand there and say, I could do this and I could do that, but he really sounded sincere in what he was saying. And I said, "Well, what's he doing?" He says, "He's got a piece of wood." And he says he's holding it, and he's got a blade, and he's carving the middle out of it. And I knew before he'd even told me he were making. I don't know how I knew. I knew he said he were making a yoke. And I said, "A yoke?" He went, "Yeah." I said, "What's he want to do?" He says he's grinning, and he's lifting it, and he's putting it over your arms to hold you. He says, and he's grinning, and if he could hurt you, he would. And I thought, oh, that's creepy. He said he's been here, he's tied to the land, he's been here a long, long time. He says, and I don't think he were ever human. It's just fascinating. And, if people know about what I'm about and the truth proof books, I've never really written anything about mediums or mediums coming up onto the cliff tops and sensing things. But I don't think there's any reason why it doesn't have a place in the phenomena. If we can believe that there's transparent beings walking about in these locations, Winterhill, where Mick McLaren and yourself and Lee Roscoe and all, are all having a little dig and a delve, then why can't we play with the notion that people can actually sense and perceive deceased people and other intelligences? I mean, I've not really got enough knowledge of mediumship and mediums, but I do believe some of them claim that they channel other intelligences, not necessarily spirits of deceased humans, aliens, for want of a better word.
No. And do you think this is potentially like something historic, something shamanic? Or I mean, it did say that he weren't human. I mean, what does that imply? It's such a strange thing. I mean, it sounds genuine because it's so bizarre, really. If you know what I mean, it's obviously what he was picking up, but
Absolutely.
Such a strange thing to say, so random that you. Because I think we've said it in the past. I think there's been a couple of mediums. When I've been up there with you, we've had a couple of mediums up there. And, they don't come out with, if you were going to fake it, they don't come out with the generalizations, do they? They're not the kind of things. I mean, what I mean by that is that you could easily go on the web, have a quick look about Bempton and
find something that...
a very well-known case.
Who's gone missing here, and he stood beside me now, and this man, this woman, or whatever. Now, we've not had any of that. Never had any of that. No. Janet Wildman, another medium, came to the cliff tops with us, and you met Janet, and she retold the story that I went up at, I don't know what the year was, probably, I want to say 2020, with Janet, with Andy Ramsden, and Janet's son, Carl. And Andy and Janet claim, and I never saw it, that a bar of light lit up, just a single bar, like you picture a fluorescent tube just lit up in one of the old RAF buildings up on the hill. We're on the cliff top path. We're not on that land. And they both became quite animated about it. So there were nothing spiritual. There were nothing that suggested as regards receiving messages. That was just another strange occurrence. And whilst that was happening, here's where it gets a bit weird. Whilst I didn't see this bar of light up what they were getting animated about. I were more interested in Janet's son, who will be going on for, if he's not 40, he'll be almost 40. Decent, fairly well-adjusted fella. He's trying to climb fence. And I got him back and pulled him back. And we left, and he were very disturbed and very upset, and we left the area and drove home, dropped Andy off, dropped Janet off. Janet came back to my home short time later, and she said, I've been speaking to Carl, and he's never going to go back there again. I said, why? She said, he said in his head he could hear people screaming, he could hear all sorts of disturbed voices and things that were upsetting him. It's weird. It's just a strange spot at times.
It's very, very strange. Yeah. I mean, well, Tino's asking here, how would you do it? I mean, do you know what? It's one of those things that I haven't given any thought to whatsoever, but you're not the first person to mention that, Tino, because someone on the recent video we did, there's a couple of people mentioned that how would you defend yourself if one felt threatened and leapt on you? And I guess, look, all you can do with that is just not. Well, you don't want to threaten, do you?
No, that's true. But Tino, do you know when people have said, "Why are you highlighting where these things are?" There's enough people we'll use Dayton's Dyke as an example. There's enough people have seen these cats or cat in that dyke. I'm not highlighting anybody more than anyone else, because you can speak to people who are walking about. I don't mean everybody, but people will tell you that they've seen it. How would you defend yourself? They don't want to be near you. Earlier, I don't know whether back end of year or early this year, I interviewed a lady called Rachel. And I got her on camera, but she wouldn't go on camera. But I used the camera and walked around with her, and she gave me her description of the cat that she saw. Can't remember year now. Big black cat, and she'd got, I think, a spaniel dog with her. And Rachel walked around, showed me where it was. And you know the steps that you go up at the bottom where the beach is, Chris, and you go up them steps on the left-hand side.
Yep.
And she said it was just laid in the grass before the steps. She says its tail was flicking. She said, and I'd got my dog. I saw it before my dog, and I got my dog on its lead. And I don't mean she just walked past it within feet, but she walked past it within like 10 to 15 feet, and we're watching it. And she got down the steps as quick. It didn't show any aggression towards her. It might not have even, well, it must have known she could see it. She could see it. But there's another one on Short Lane where a lady's walking her horse. She's walking a pony on Short Lane to take it. I don't know. We'll set her some stables or to another field. I don't know. But she's walking it. And she said, in the grass, there's a big black cat. And that's doing the same thing. She said her horse was startled and didn't rear up, but it knew it was there. But she carried on walking and did her own thing and avoided it. But I don't think that these cats want confrontation with anybody. I've got the Bobster. So what have I got to worry about? when you've got a beast like Bobby, you don't need to worry, honestly.
And I've got Lorraine.
Oh, hey,
so
no, then
she
that's
says here. She says here she was out, and it's true. She was out riding a few years ago with a mate and saw a Black Panther type cat, and then only a month ago she saw it. She saw a different one in a different area. So it's really common. And there was something that I'm just going to put this comment up. It wasn't in caps. I don't know whether it's still in there. Where is it? There you go. Sure, this one. Someone put in predator cats, at least in the UK, they would have attacked a person or eaten a person's dog by now. I don't believe it, to be honest. There's no way on earth a large predator cat has never attacked someone. Well, as it happens, there's an article in one. I think it might have been the Mail or the Mirror. That there's a guy in there that was attacked by a cat, and he shows a big cut, a big gash on his arm. So I don't think, like Paul said, I don't think they're going to attack anybody unless in extreme circumstances, they may have had, I don't know, they might have a young litter, or you might have just startled it, or you may have a dog with you and it's just doing, it's just defending itself. They don't need, a lot of people in the comment section were talking on the video on YouTube, were talking about, well, they would have attacked a small child. And look, I think on a very, very, very rare occasion, that would be, in terms of attacking a human, that could happen on a very rare occasion. But
I still think all we're doing is speculating whether they could or they couldn't, because
yeah, for sure.
All I need to focus on is I'm not going to lie to myself and appease somebody that doesn't believe they're here. If somebody doesn't believe that they're here and thinks it's a load of rubbish, then I'll just say fine. That's your opinion. Myself and Bob Brown have already seen it just off Jewison Lane as we came home from Bempton. So I'm not going to lie to myself. I've seen the cat with my own eyes. I know it exists. Do you think at 62-year-old, I'm going to, well, I was probably 61 when I was climbing up and down them bankings and up into these places. I mean, you saw how thorny it was. Just that's before things have started to grow in that latest shot that we've put on. And it's inaccessible when soon as spring does start to spring. And I'm not going to put myself in those locations if I didn't think there was some merit in it. But, if I don't find the evidence that some people require as regards, I don't know what they'd want as evidence. You could get pictures and they'd say it were fake. I mean, when we put that one on last year, myself and Les, well, I put it on, I filmed it, and then we put it onto YouTube. I'd used some big cat images, which were AI. Of course I had, because everything's copyrighted. So I got some big cat images out, and I never at one moment said that was, this is an original image of the cat that I've taken in Dane's diet, because it wasn't. But people still were putting in chat, these are AI images. It's not a real cat. And I'm thinking, you've just missed the point, mate, But anyway.
No, I think Tonya Morrison said, yeah, do we think the big cats are spreading? I actually think they are, or certainly an awareness of them is definitely. I mean, you're getting all the daily rags now will definitely publish an article like that. I mean, they're publishing obviously all the UFO stuff as well at the moment. A lot of the stuff they wouldn't cover, they now see there's a huge interest in this. Whether it be big cats, anything unusual really, because I just think, obviously, life's tough and it's hard usually and a bit stressful, and people like to change a pace, change a subject, just to think about something fresh and interesting. And I think that's why this subject's gone through the roof at the minute.
But do people need a place, a platform like this to share what their profound experiences? I mean, look, a few weeks ago, and Stephen Collins in chat, and it was Stephen that put these witnesses in touch with me, and he set it up, and I went and met them witnesses at Flixton, and we've got two witnesses. Well, there's a man and a woman, and lady didn't want to go on camera, and this guy's talking about walking through Flixton Woods with his dogs, and his dog comes shooting up the path, seeing not frightened to death, but a little bit distressed, and he sees about, I don't know, 12 inch off the ground, a black, almost oval, black sausage, if you like, just moving through the trees. and his partner, who's very skeptical, said, she said, well, I saw it, I don't know what it was. And he's seen this, but then in a different time period, because he saw his just recently, in a different time period, the other lady had come into Flixton Woods to meet. So these three people, the husband and wife, and the lady on her own, who was with her husband, but her husband was at work, so he couldn't talk to me. She'd been walking in the woods with her husband, looking at her two dogs, which are just on a slightly elevated bank walking. And then she realizes one of the dogs coming up the path, screaming and yapping and crying its head off. And when she looks to see what the other dog is, why there's two, there's just the back and a tail of something paralleling a dog.
So what is that? I mean, I watched that.
Something that's slipping between worlds. I just think it's in and out of existence. If we talk about different spheres of existence, I don't know. Everybody's.
There were no sinister. There was nothing negative. A vibe. There were no negative vibe though, was there? Other than being frightened, obviously.
The dog were terrified. Right. She says the dog shot off, and her husband had to go looking for it. Isn't it? Were a rescue dog, and she said it weren't good with people and not good with other dogs. So they were worried. She went back down home to get the whistle because it would come back for the whistle. When she came back, her husband was coming back with the dog, and he's saying, "Quick, get in there, the Land Rover, get in the Land Rover, get in the Land Rover." He says, "Why?" He says, "It's following me," and it were coming back, and it were following him.
Pretty weird. That's a strange one, isn't it?
But here's another interesting bit to the Flixton Woods sighting. It gives you clues where the couple saw this black cube moving, and it weren't angular. I said, "Did it have sharp edges?" He said, "No." He said, "That's because I asked that. It was just off the ground, and it was just moving through the trees." But where they saw it, and where the lady and her husband saw it, are literally. They must have been in the same place, because he saw it moving through the trees, and as he stopped after telling me the story, we walked up about another 30 yards, and she began to tell her story, and it's the same spot. So we've got a location, and I also have been told that there's another witness to this who's on holiday at the moment in New Zealand who's going to speak to me, who's seen the same or similar in there. So it's brilliant. Location is key. It's just amazing.
And you say that's Flixton?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting with Flixton, because obviously you've got the bipedal figures up there.
The Flixton werewolf.
Yeah, and obviously the woman at the Spittle Inn said that she thought there were a Bigfoot up there, didn't she, as well? Because someone just put in the chat earlier, I just noticed a question. It was up earlier talking about a report of a bipedal creature taking sheep. Now, that's similar to one of the reports I took when I was making Elusive. I think it was off Charmaine Fraser, actually, up in Scotland, and it were taking. No, it might not. No, it wasn't. It was someone else. It was another witness, and they were just carrying sheep away, which is absolutely uncanny, really. Because obviously, one of the big questions that comes up is this abundance of food. We know there's plenty of food. We know this. And people, have an issue with the fact that, these things are not reported. If there were tens of thousands of sheep going missing, obviously, it would have been reported. Well, these things do get reported.
These things do get reported.
You might say, you'll know more about this than I will, but, farmers and that community, it's a different world, isn't it? It's like, it's literally a different community that talk amongst themselves. They function amongst themselves.
Very secular. I'm not going to say who the farmer is, but there's a farmer up on Wolds, close to Langtoft. And I realise a lot of people won't know where Langtoft is. Alex Thompson in chat. Hi, Alex. Drew Hollins, Adam Sando, Stephen Collins, Di. Let's have a look. Malcolm Dodgson. Mally's a good man to know. He's in the know when it comes to finding things. What we're going to say, up on the Wolds. And he says, when there's a funeral, and everybody's had a beer and they're just talking and saying good things about a friend that's passed, a lot of this stuff about the cats and the UFOs gets spoken about.
Yeah,
it's very close. It's like mining communities. It's like the trawlermen. They don't. You're spot on with what you're saying. They don't talk outside of it. Outside, I suppose it's same in any profession. If you are dealing with finance, they're not going to talk about what they're dealing with outside of that circle, outside of that tight-knit group, are they?
Plus,
I know it don't quite apply, but it's the same principle.
Well, yeah, but with this, we've said it before, there is an embarrassment factor still, regardless of what people think, because, not everybody's, sometimes I forget, not everybody's on our page, some people are on their own page way off what, where we are. So, I like our community. I think it's, I think a lot of us would be lost without the community. It's like, that's why we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. We'd be lost without each other when we gather at these conferences. It's great to meet up, isn't it? And chat with just people that
have like-minded people. Yeah,
for sure. What's Jojo saying now? She saw Black Cat. Yeah, you dare not tell anyone. It's just echoing what we've said. Because there is still a factor that. And there's nothing worse than someone not believing you. I don't think, no matter what it is.
It's
in
difficult.
General,
you imagine. We'll jump back to the big cats in a moment, but you imagine if you've had a really deeply traumatic UFO experience or alien type experience, or relative or brilliant, and it's really tattooed itself into your mind to the point where you probably think about it every day, and it's deep and it's personal to you, and then you decide you're going to share it with somebody. and they just roll their eyes and think, "You idiot." You know, there'd have been a swear word attached to before idiot, but you know, then kind of it's hurtful. Obviously, people can disagree and people can sort of say, "Do you know?" Unless I see it myself,
which is fine.
I can't believe it. Do you know what I mean? I find what you're saying is unbelievable. That's why I love the police officers. You probably know what I'm going to say. Who came into the forest with the Rotherham guys, and he listened to them all night. And after, at the end of the night, when we were packing up and sort of getting us things, I said, "What do you think then?" And they knew, if they weren't tricked, they knew what he were about. He goes, "Well, unless I saw something like that myself, I can't believe it." He says, "But after speaking to these guys all night, I believe they're telling the truth." Yeah. And I thought, what a great way to put that. You've not insulted anybody, and I can respect that you're not going to believe something. Seeing is believing. But you know, he kind of interviewed them with all the techniques, trying to cross-reference things and hoping they might trip themselves up, which they weren't going to do, because I believe it happened.
No. Well, like Andy's saying here, when he's saying when he collated when he were working for the Lincolnshire Police, the definite proof of big cats existed in the Lincolnshire countryside, corroborated by London Zoo, and published that fact in county and local press. And you know, this is going on all over the country actually at the moment. So, you know, people don't read as many newspapers as they used to, I suppose.
Andy, I don't want to put you on spot, but I am putting you on spot. Would you come on last transmission and even for half an hour and talk about what you saw on that road, what crossed the road, and how it made you feel? Obviously, you might just say, "No, that's good enough." I've heard it, and it's fascinating. It really is. And there's a little bit extra to it that Andy, and obviously Andy were there. He were on the scene. He knew. And I feel awful talking, and I know he's listening to me talking about him. But Andy were there, but they went looking for something else. They were there investigating something else, which is cryptid related. Unbelievable.
Oh, right.
And then this thing crosses road. But yeah, just yes or no, Andy. I'd love you to come on and just share this, because 100% believe what you were telling me. And I've written about it. I think is it in Truth Proof 4, Andy? I think it is. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, do you know what I wanted? What it just came into my head earlier. We were talking about Bempton on cliff tops and stuff. And do you know? So I don't know whether it's one of the questions actually. Someone talking about something frightening that might come up after. But did you ever get? I know, a tricky one to answer this, so don't if you can't. Did you ever get any more information about the elderly couple that had missing time up there? Because that it sounds like really scary. That
were traumatic. I'm a friend of a very close relative of theirs, and when they came home, they told this person what had happened to them on an early evening walk, a walk along cliff tops, but very few people about, and that elderly couple didn't see a flash of light as we've had. Howard Hughes, bless him, he took a report for me, and we'll get to that one in a moment, and it was just a flash of light, and when them people got back to their car, they'd lost about an hour and a half of time. But this weren't just a flash of light. This lady and this old gentleman, husband and wife, woke up in a room, and in their words, they were having procedures done on them, intimate places, and that must be traumatic when you. It'd be traumatic for anybody, wouldn't it? But can you imagine if you've lived your life and not had any interest in anything like this, and then something so invasive takes place? That's just absolutely off the scale of fear. You know, so no, I've not got no further.
How many cases like that have you had up there? Missing time. There's quite a few. I mean, that's one episode. The one with Howard that Howard put me in touch with. They went up. I'm trying to think at year. Someone tells me it were 2017, and Howard told me all about it, and then got me in touch with these people, and they'd gone for a walk to Flamborough in the night, as they'd done many times along the cliff tops. And don't put me on spot, people, if you've read this, because my times are going to be wrong. But let's assume they went at 8 o'clock and they'd get back at 9:30. I don't know. Midpoint on journey back,
there's a huge flash of light and it becomes daylight for a second. We've been up there, we've seen that. We've not had missing time, but we've seen that. And I don't know, people can call it freak weather phenomena. I don't know, it sheet lightning, but it were daylight for a second. Well, they thought no more about it. When they got back to the car, there were an hour and a half of time difference. I think I said it were 10:30, and it should have been something like 9. Or if it were 9:30, it were 11. Do you know what I mean? There were an hour and a half of time difference, and there were other bits as well. This guy had got a scar on his navel that he didn't have before. That I don't think I've ever talked about that bit, but there were, and it's just it was fascinating. I thank Howard for that, and yeah, just a great report. But there are more. Off the top of my head, I can't just pull them out. But there are more. You know, aspect that talk. Oh, there's one actually where a guy went to. He were walking cliff tops and he'd walked from Bempton and he'd walked to Speeton, and however long it took him, it took him about 3 times as long to get back. I've got one with 5.5 hours of missing time at Scarborough, which is only 15, 20 miles up coast. Yeah. And I only looked at that tonight, funnily enough, and thought, these are all stories and accounts, a lot of them that I don't mean I've never followed up, I've not written up in detail, because there's just so many. A lady contacted me today, and we've put it on website, the latest report on the website, truthproof.uk. And this lady, as a young girl, I'll not go into too much detail about what the life were like, but she ended up living just a mum and an older brother and 2 older brothers and sisters. So I think she was 9, her older brother was 10 or 11, and mum were working 6 or 7 days a week in a factory. So these 2 younger children had to look after themselves till mum come home. Yeah, and they're playing and doing what they're doing, and she goes running through one of the rooms and looks into the kitchen, and stood against the fridge is a huge figure that's just all black with, she said, flaming orange or red eyes. And I only got this report the other day. I'm going to hopefully speak to this lady tomorrow. And no arms, no legs. And it's there. And they both see it. Terrified, they run upstairs 3 steps at a time. I can have read the email. It's, you know, they go inside. It's a council house, I believe. There's a little latch to lock the door on inside, and they get under a white sheet and they stay there terrified. She says, and I heard the door open from the outside, which it couldn't do. She said, and this thing comes in and we can see it through the sheet. And there's more. There's not more in the email, but there's more, because I can tell reading this email. And I really thank people for having courage to share things like that, because I know that there might be somebody, you know, because we've got we're going on for 150 people in chat. There might be somebody within the chat who's had a similar experience, and what it will do, it'll give them, that lady who's talking to me and you, a little bit more confidence and a little bit more faith that they're not wasting the time sharing these what in some instances are horrific accounts. I don't know.
I saw a big black cat run across Beverley bypass in 2008. Have you heard of any in that area, Paul?
Yeah, I have, Chris. Yeah, and I can't think of the name. There's a disused service station, Chris, or a disused road. There's the service station. It must be near Transline, and which will be a bit further up the road from where you are, but we're on the same field, in the same area, should I say. And there's reports from round there. I think it's where you turn down to what's called Sigglesthorne, and then you'd go onto Hornsey. A lot of reports of black cats there, but there you go. There's another guy that's seen the cat. It's fascinating, isn't it? The amount of people. I think anything unrelated to UFO phenomena or anything, you get talking about the cats, and they'll either say they've seen one or they know somebody that's seen one.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's a good point. Yeah. Lee Roscoe, what about Paul's witness in the car seeing sheep drag through the wall? Yeah, I mean that's a weird sighting. That one.
You know, I thought about it, Lee, and I'm so pleased that you brought that up, because as Chris were talking about it, it came into my head, and I thought, I'll just mention that. It weren't a wall, but you're on the right path. They called this guy Gordon. And I've already filmed him. He allowed me to film him, but we were getting a busy road, and I need to film him again. And his partner came through. Lovely people. I think he were an engineer, an architect. I'm not a surveyor, and he'd been working in Scarborough. most of the week, and he were coming home. Flixton of all places, he stopped at the garage at Flixton to put some fuel in. And as he's driving up the road, then towards roughly where the woodland where the two couples saw this black thing floating and this head and tail, the bottom of that woodland, because there's a path that runs through and round, but the bottom of that woodland is looking up in slow traffic, and there's sheep in the field below the woodland. And he says he saw one of the sheep. So you imagine that's a sheep. It's not really, it's a candle. But you imagine that's a sheep, right? So if it were walking, it had just walked forward, wouldn't it? It was as though something had grabbed the side of the sheep on the side, not the front, not the back. And he says, I watched the sheep just go sideways into the woodland. And what a story! What an unusual one! And he said he watched it, and I'll tell you what adds to a bit more credence to his story, a little bit more substance. He lived in Leeds, and it had affected him so much. Oh, we know Leeds isn't miles and miles away, but it's an hour and a half, and he drove an hour and a half back from Leeds with his partner to tell me this story and stand and show me where he'd seen it, and. I just find that's as interesting as somebody saying, I was driving along and this bipedal fur-covered thing just ran across the road in front of me. Because what is it? What's the mechanics? If Gordon's telling the truth, and not everybody's lying, so there's a good chance he is. If Gordon's telling the truth, what is it that's at work that could take hold of a sheep on its side, and it's invisible, and just take it backwards into the woods? It's just nuts. It's nuts. I went up into the woods looking for a sheep carcass. I must admit, I didn't find anything, but there you go. Yeah,
it's so odd. It's so odd. I mean, look, we've said it before, haven't we? About, all right, we're lucky to frequent these areas and know people that frequent these areas, so we get the sightings and get the reports. But so there must be so many other places around Britain, around the world, in fact. You know, Tino, devil's advocate, but why black cats? Why
it's not just black cats, Tino. The sandy coloured ones are seen also.
You saw a sandy coloured one, didn't you, in Dane's Dyke, didn't you? Oh, you thought you did?
I thought I did, yeah. It were up on its toes, but I don't know what it was that ran away. It was a sandy coloured animal. Yeah, I forgot about that, to be honest.
You saw a few, didn't you? Or did it have some?
No. I thought it was. I said it could have been a lynx or something. Yeah. And that were in that little coppice of woodland that juts out.
Yeah.
And I'd forgot about that. We've definitely seen the black one, but up at these locations, I realised that I'm talking about up around Grindle. I stopped and spoke to some farmers because there seems to be a wave every year. There's a certain time at harvest time that they're seen, and I spoke to some farmers, and they were a father and son farmer. His son just looked like a cutting of him. They were just so typical with braces on, but they looked alike. And I said, weird question to ask, lads, but there's been reports of a cat seen, and he went, he's seen it, and his son, he pointed to his son, who weren't a young lad or old, he was in his 30s, and sure enough, this guy said, yeah, it went just bounding across the field, and that were a beige cat. And I know I'm not going to say which property this is at, because I want to go and speak to him. It's a really, really grand property in East Yorkshire. And they were looking out from their palatial property, the really, really grand house, at the field that had been cut. And you know how they cut it, and then all the straws turned, and you can see it in rows.
Yeah.
And they saw a big black cat going down the row, and it jumped into the corn, and which would have only been about 12-inch high after the crop's been cut. They never saw it again. It disappeared. Jumped in, and they never saw it again. Now, I've not spoke to these people, but I've been told by two different people the story. I bet Mally Dodson knows this story, but if he doesn't, I'll tell him about it when I speak to him.
So I've heard you say this a couple of times. So is there a part of you that thinks that there may well be some sort of paranormal, supernatural element to some of these sightings?
Yeah, in a way. And here's my thinking on it. And it don't mean I'm right, people, does it? But whoever is familiar with Truth Proof books, you might have heard me talk about Short Lane. Short Lane separates Bridlington from Bempton. It's just a mile-long single-track road. with a few pull-ins for oncoming traffic. Either side of Short Lane, you've got a privet hedge going down one side, which is no more than, and it's broken up as well. It's not like some kind of little strip of woodland. It's just privet hedge, about 4 or 5 foot tall. The other side's same, and you've got arable land. You've got cattle grazing in one side, and you've got crops in other side. So there's nothing. There's no habitat to hide a large feline at all. Yet loads of reports coming from Short Lane, and not just from Paul Sinclair. When I was going through the archives, particularly in the Bridlington Free Press, and I'm literally doing year after year after year. It took years going through all the microfilm and looking at these papers, reports. I don't mean loads or hundreds of reports, loads and loads, but far too many big cat sightings on Short Lane for it to be normal. Do you know what I mean? And Short Lane's also renowned for UFO sightings. It's also renowned in 2006, Chris. Once again, the Bridlington Free Press, there were big cat reports, but there were also reports that said, the headline said, "Hunt for the deer butcherers," and deer carcasses had been found on Short Lane.
Yeah,
but unusually, no meat had been taken, and it had been pared off the bone in an unusual manner. I wish I'd have got, in 2006, I wouldn't ever have got to see these, would I? But I would have loved to have known what they meant. It sounds quite exotic.
It does,
the meat had been pared off the bone in an unusual manner, and they were looking for people who'd been poaching, but no meat had been taken. And they found these deer over a number of weeks, and they found them also at Woldgate. And guess what were cropping up in between the deer sightings? UFO reports. People seeing spheres of orange light, and you can't say A is responsible for B, but it's interesting. But when you go through an archive and you look at lots and lots of newspapers, you might look for a full year and see one report of unusual lights, or one report of Joe Smith and his partner driving home from Driffield, and they see what they call a spaceship. One. Then you might go another year and find nothing. But then you find a paper that says, we've got Hunt for the Deer Butcherers, and we've got UFO sightings. It's same with the wallaby decapitations. I think that was 2010. When that were happening at Sowerby, 2 miles away at Flamborough, people were reporting UFOs. They were actually side by side in newspaper. They didn't connect them. They're just different stories. Do you know what I mean? And it were interesting, No,
look, it's a good theory, because how many times have we heard a lot of researchers talk about how the phenomena presents itself in various forms?
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
may not. Sometimes it may not be the phenomena behind it. It's as interesting as anything else, I suppose. So Lenny's asking, Paul, any more occurrences today?
Oh yeah, get this. Seriously. This is, well, I'm saying it's interesting. It's interesting to Paul. It might not be interesting to you guys. So there's not been much happening in this property recently. You talk about the hitchhiker effect and wonder if anything is happening. Are you taking this a remnant or some kind, or is the energy that you're taking back after experiencing something helping enhance something in the home? Yeah. So today, I'm in the house. I've been doing a bit of work actually last few weeks. It's took me weeks. What it took me days years ago, it's taking me weeks. So I've removed 2 double doors and put a single door on. Blah blah blah. And I'm stood in the hallway talking to Mary. My wife's got 2 hearing aids in, so her hearing ain't great. There's a reason I've said that. I'm not just trying to highlight it. And as I'm talking, there's a noise in kitchen. I can't really replicate it, but there's a. It was sharper than that, but there's a noise in kitchen. I said, "Did you hear that?" She said, "Yeah, I did." And dog looks up. He's having a look, and carried on talking. And then I were on phone. Actually, I'm trying to think who I were on phone to. But I were on phone. It don't make no difference. I could say anybody. You're not going to know. But I were on phone, and I said, "I just heard this noise." Then it does it again. So I think, what the hell's happening here? Then it does it again. So there's 3 times this noise. So Mary didn't hear it the other 2 times. So then I go and stand in room again, and I'm talking. I said I heard it. I'm looking. I'm actually focused on it, listening for this noise. And the next thing that happens is, I said to Mary, did you say something then? And I hear this in between us. And it was like somebody were whispering. And she said, I never said, oh. She were actually doing a scratch card. I thought she'd maybe 100 grand and was saying, right, I can leave him. You know what I mean? Maybe would. But she's doing a scratch card. She likes doing them. So anyway, so I heard that. So, right, then we extend this because I thought I'm going to ring Ian up and tell him what's just happened. Because that's what we do. You know what I mean? We're not doing it's not doing it for kicks and thrills. But so I rang him up, and I'd have been speaking to him earlier because he was going to come down, because Ian's going to be talking at the Awakening conference about some of his experiences from childhood to present day, and he's going to start this PowerPoint and put all these episodes on it. Said he couldn't make it; he'd got something on, which were fine. So I'd been talking to him earlier, so I rang him up. I said, I'm telling him about this noise, these 3 noises I'd heard, then a whispering, and then Ian's wife, Elaine, suddenly went, "Oh God, Ian, look at this! Watch this!" And the television turned itself on in Ian's house. She says, in all years they've had it, or the TV in that room. I mean, he can tell me the mechanics of what's happening there, but that's what I heard on phone. And the TV in his home turned itself on. Is all this just coincidence? Are we all crazy and just making it up? Have I spent all day rehearsing this story with Ian so I can tell it to you guys? I tell you I haven't. But do you see? It's crazy. And I think everybody in chat knows that when something starts to unfold, because there's not a lot happened in this property for a while now, but when things start to unfold and sort of that splash in the pond and then ripples go out, I think you get that little effect until it dissipates again. So something's afoot. Yeah, interesting. But
it's not just you two, is it? I think some of the other guys haven't they reported odd goings on as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And Ian's been having strange things happening in the house. After that strange thing with Jeremy's car other week, he's so level-headed. He is. If you get speaking to him, you'll see what we mean. And he thinks he's really sort of critical in his thinking about trying to solve what we're dealing with in a way that's really rational. He's not looking for the paranormal, but he was convinced that something was in the car with him on the way home. Do you know? It just, even though he couldn't see anything. Mark, who goes up onto cliff tops, he's been having strange things happening in his home at Bempton. Really strange. And he's talking about his animal, his cat, that he'd heard something, and him and the cat are looking. And really, really interesting. It's almost peripheral type events, aren't they? And I think me and Ian talked about it earlier. How many people are experiencing this kind? And Elaine, because she was quite animated because of the TV switching itself on.
Yeah.
How many people though in normal life are actually seeing and experiencing this and not really giving it the attention it deserves? Probably overlooking it. It's only the fact that we're not looking for it and creating things where there aren't things, but we're actually aware of the strangeness that's around us. And a lot of people, if just plain, might not be looking for it.
No, unsurprisingly, I mean, over the years, I've seen so many cases where people just live alongside the phenomena in their own home. They just say, "Well, it's harmless; it's not causing any trouble, and
it's not bothering me." Yeah.
I love the house. I don't want to move, and they stay put. And fair play. Each to their own, I guess.
We spoke to a lady last night on Truth Proof, Debbie Munro, and she'd had spirit activity in her home with her husband, or she said she had for many years in many properties that they'd lived in, and kind of lived alongside it, And most of the time, none of this is here to harm us, I wouldn't think, would you? If it were, then, I think it's just the stigma that a lot of people suffer. Let's just have a look here. We've got Tonya Morrison, Mandrake, Jojo, Cactus, Tino, Adam Sandor. Good to see you, Adam. And Dye. And I don't mean that literally. DYE. No, so yeah. Is that real language? It isn't really, is it? Have we any more questions, or what we're gonna cover now, guys? Have you got anything that you want? We've done an hour here, and all right, Dave Barker.
Ooh, it's a good question, that Dave. Yeah. Your favourite guest, Paul?
In recent years, Dave, probably a failed guest for myself. So I'm still wanting to talk to him. So I wouldn't say desperately. That sounds a bit sad, doesn't it? But really want to speak to Ron Moorhead. Ron's sort of getting on in years, and I don't know how much appetite he's got for going on podcasts. But I found Ron such a credible witness to the cryptid phenomena, and a witness that, I didn't think I'd ever get interested in the cryptid phenomena. It were all UFOs, alien related with me because of my experiences. But the more I look into it, and the more you listen to people like Ron Moorhead, and if you've not listened to him, please do. It might sound a bit dry and serious, but that to me just adds more credibility to what he's sharing. Ron's the guy that's famous for recording the Sierra sounds. So yeah, Ron Moorhead and Howard Hughes. Howard were going to come on. We were going to have Howard on Truth Proof, and we could have probably started him on Last Transmission. And Howard never did anything like that, and he were going to come on and share some of his experiences. I mean, that's one that we'll never get. Probably you miss Howard immensely. Yeah, I don't know about you, Chris. What about your guests?
Like you said, there's many, and I think that's why we decided to bring it back, because there's so many people to speak to. Do you know, I'd love to get so many people. I tell you, I'd like to get on here and read so much of his stuff over the years. Nick Redfern, I'll try and get Nick on actually.
Yeah,
because I think I like those. I like researchers that know, that can sort of they're not experts on any one subject, but they know a lot about various subjects.
Cover a lot of things, yeah.
Yeah, they can just cover and sometimes you can just listen to someone, it's just infectious, isn't it? And it breeds, sometimes over the years, I don't know if you guys in the chat feel this as well. Sometimes you go through, it's a bit like a roller coaster, this subject. Sometimes you can tire of it a little bit, and it exhausts you, and I don't know why that is. And you can just push it to one side for a little bit, and then you'll see something or somebody, or you'll listen to something, and sometimes it's just the way they tell a story.
It just revives it. Yeah, it revives it. What I enjoyed, and I'd love to get him on here, Jim Segala from Skinwalker.
Yeah, Jim was good. Yeah.
Jim were great. And what I liked about Jim Segala, and I know he listens to some of these, what I liked about Jim Segala is the fact that when we first spoke to him, he were very, very stoic in his approach, and there was nothing paranormal, there was nothing. And when the next time we spoke to him, he'd had his own experience. Didn't mean he jumped over the fence and become like, I'm in the land of woo, but he'd had his own experience, and it had changed his views, and it had softened him so much. It were really good to hear. But there's so many people, and do you know what I like? And please take this on board, people in chat, you guys, because people like Debbie, who we spoke to last night on Truth Proof, there's people in chat now who could hold this audience now for 2 hours and longer with your experiences. Consider contacting us and coming on. And if you only wanted to do 30 minutes, please consider doing it, because your stories and your accounts are just as valid as Whitley Strieber's, mine, anybody's, Nick Redfern's, anybody's, because why are you any less important, And I love first-hand accounts. I mean, look at the probably greatest radio show host that's ever been in this subject, Art Bell. A lot of the time he'd speak to people who'd not got a name in the subject, as well as the high-profile people. And he got some incredible stories. I mean, I love listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. I mean, we're giving Sight a plug here, but why not? It's great. And Wes from Sasquatch Chronicles speaks to everyday people. And do you know the accounts that these loggers give in the forests, and people just driving on a lonely country road during the night are absolutely amazing. They're out of this world. And so
I like people from the woo. Anyone from the woo.
Tonya Morrison, I'll come on, Paul. Well, what we have to do, Tonya, is in the week, drop me a message, and we can have a natter and see what ground we can cover. Whether it's half an hour, or 2 hours, let's kick that about. If Chris is in favour of that as well, you know what I mean? I don't want to...
Sure, yeah, no worries. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Rivington Pike, Lee Roscoe, do you think the Sheriff sounds were amplified in sound, like Ron Moore had heard the camp being smashed up? But yeah, it is a strange phenomenon, that, isn't it? It's like similar to the bluff charges, isn't it? And
it is. But you know, I got to speak to Ron, even though we've had him on live stream and his internet connection was just absolutely rubbish. But hopefully we'll get him on. And I got to speak with Ron, and I said something to Ron that I don't think he'd considered. And not the mimicking. I think there's a lot of people on board with that, but I don't think sometimes things are being smashed up. I think these things are almost like minor birds. They can mimic sounds and amplify, as like you've just said, Lee, sounds. But then there were sounds near people's homes and sounds in the woodland, like clicking sounds and things. And I said to Ron, look at whales. They use echolocation to find their prey, and they use what's called echolocation, and they set this sound off, and it will locate. And from what the whale receives back, it can tell what kind of prey it is. It's shoal of fish or whatever. And what if these things are using echolocation with the clicks and the sounds? Do you know what I mean? And there's so many aspects, and so many people talk about hearing babies crying. It's almost like the mimicking. And although these things, if they're bipedal and will loosely use the term, they look fairly humanoid. They do in the fact that they've got arms, legs, fingers, and toes. Well, they might have offspring as well, so that could be the baby that's crying deep in the forest that people are hearing.
Well, the baby crying is a common thing. So you hear that in fae accounts as well, don't you?
Well, you know, I probably wind people up a little bit when I say things like, "I wonder if the fae are responsible for it all." Seriously, when you look at this phenomena deeply, they're not little Tinkerbell winged things that fly about, giving people lovely experiences. There's some horrific accounts. And they say that they can shapeshift and transform. Well, if you were in their environment, we'll cite Debbie, who were on Truth Proof yesterday. She said that her husband, when they were walking in a woodland and had a wee, and she believes that they disrespected the fae if that were near their environment, because something growled, something terrified them and drove them out of the woodland. She said, next thing we know, there's all branches breaking, snapping of trees. It sounded like a gorilla. And now, if you wanted to move something from a woodland, would you appear as a little figure that big, or would you appear as something like a cryptid? I know which one I'd probably run from, even if it's all illusion and smoke and mirrors. I know it's a bit deep, people. I'm not asking anybody to believe any of this. We're just throwing ideas about. I've not got any firm belief in what I'm talking about myself. I'm just throwing hooks out and wondering what we catch on them, because, you know, I think only by kicking these ideas about that will we ever come up with any answers.
Well, culturally, you know, really the fae aren't really any different than the Islamic jinn. Everything you talked about there, you will hear in jinn accounts. So, look, the idea that you think they could be responsible for this, or you're just putting it out there, as you say, and I think it's as good a theory as any I've heard. So, you know, it's jury's out, and it will be out for a while.
Absolutely. and Rivington Pike Lee says it happens in haunted house a lot. Ron Moorhead heard a baby and a car door shut. Crazy. Yeah. And how does that work? A car door shut deep in the forest. You know, last year I'm going to say interviewed, and that's not the right word. I bumped into a guy in the early hours of the morning in Danes Dyke. He were on the beach, actually, just foraging down near waterline. It's daylight. Daylight's broken, and I ended up talking to him, and he'd slept in the Danes Dyke all night. And I just asked the question. I says, crazy question, but you've been in there on your own all night. Anything strange happen? And he went, yeah, they did actually. It did actually. I said, well, what happened? He says, well, in the night, I heard a noise like steel, like a big machine cranking and grinding, like something doing a big mechanical turn, like big steel machine. I says, whereabouts? He said, very close to me. And he's in woods. He's just in the woods. So what's happening there? You know,
That
this
sounds
is
like the missing 411 noise.
random stranger that I ask a totally off the cuff question to this guy, I would imagine. Do you know what I mean? And he came out with that strange little anecdote, which I found fascinating, you know, as I do. And do you know, sorry to butt in, Chris, but I often think to myself, you see people walking about, you know, I'm a big fan of Charlie Veitch, and I like to listen to what he's got to say. I like his observations on the world, and I like how he can deliver words without getting himself into a lot of trouble, and he's clever. So, and if you've not watched him, watch him. You either love him or hate him, but I like him. But what I've often thought to myself, would I be brave enough to just walk into town and just stop people at random and say, just want to ask you a question. Have you ever had any strange experiences, any strange paranormal experiences? I'll either just get laughed at or told to do one, but I'll just wonder how people would react to somebody bold enough to start walking about, putting ideas in chat here for you guys. It might be something to do.
No, I'll tell you what, I bet you get a decent strike rate out of 10. I bet you would get a 1 in 10, at least a 1 in 10, I would have thought.
How about Vic Cundiff as a guest? Yeah, I suppose Ellsworth, considering I've been a guest on Dogman, is it Encounters, probably 4 times over years, but I've not done any for years. I forgot one this week, to be honest with you. Must be losing my mind. So, Mysteries and Monsters podcast, I do apologise. I already have done to him. Ashton Forbes, I don't know who it is.
I don't know who Ashton Forbes is actually. I should sort of apologize to Ashton if I've heard the name. I haven't heard the same. Yeah. Lee's just saying about that noise, that metallic noise. I think that's isn't that off the Missing 411 documentaries? I think it's
is that it? The door open and close. Well, I wouldn't have thought the Dogmen were on the 411. I don't know, but the metallic sounds, I think, aren't they, Chris? You know, well, I spoke to the guy who now lives in Australia, who had his experience at Wilsthorpe Woods today.
Do you know what? I was just going to mention him. It's funny.
Yeah, well, we're going to have it. We keep, you know, we've become quite good friends, and we'll be having a little, I don't know, you know, messenger video call over the weekend. We don't do it every week, but every month or so. But getting back to his experience with his, I think there were 2 or 3 people in Wilsthorpe Woods when they went and did a bit of wild camping. They said that after this thing that he was the one that saw it holding his friend upside down, and he saw it holding it in a fur-covered hand, and he only saw the arm, didn't see anything else. His friend were over 6 foot tall, and he's holding it like a baby by the calf upside down. And after that had happened, though, every 20 minutes the woodland exploded. He said, and it sounded like a gunshot going off, and your trees just breaking in half. But he didn't talk about any carnage. He said there must have been more than one. They were running round us, and there were trees breaking, and there were like the sound of wild animals, like you'd imagine, like that, like Debbie said, like a gorilla charging round in the undergrowth. This is in Wilsthorpe Woods. This is near Rotherham and Sheffield, you know. And but when they came out that day, never said anything about any carnage in the trees. Never said then the devastation, trees split in half, branches ripped off, trees uprooted.
Yeah.
So are we having voice projection here? Are we got something that can amplify sounds with some superior vocalization? I think it's possible.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Very odd. Yeah, Ashton Forbes. It's Tino's just put in there. It's MH370, is it? You know, the missing plane.
Okay.
Some strange stuff going on about that at the moment. Have you seen any of that?
No.
Yeah, I've only a little bit that I have seen about it. I believe it's fake. Some of it that I've seen. I don't know the details. I could be wrong. I've not looked into it, but just looking at it from the outside, and not all of it. There's all sorts of information going around about all these cases all the time. And that's, I suppose, actually, that's a good point. You know, that's why you should probably talk to someone who specializes in these cases. A bit like you with the lightning. Yeah. You know, you can get a few people that throw a few facts at you. You know stuff that, you know, nobody knows. So that's why it's important, isn't it, to get the right people on here and the right researchers. It's it's a good point, Tina.
The lightning's an incredible case. Even September the 8th, 1970, and it's still intrigues me. And I'll not go into any more detail than there's somebody in chat that's got a lot of information on XS894. And that's all I'll say, by the way. So you know that I'm good for my word. When there's nearly 150 people in chat, so your guess is as good as mine. But it's still got mileage in it. I mean, I know a radar operator that were working on the night that plane went down, and he's got things to say, and he's been silenced. Do you know what I mean? I'm still hoping. I'm still ever hopeful. And there's so many things to pack around it. You know, there's a guy called Dean Bolton, and I've talked about him to you. I'm going to call you Pete then. Why would I going to do that? This is my head's gone. Dean Bolton, Chris. And back in the day, in 1970, he was a schoolboy, and he's former butcher at Flamborough, you know, in his adult life. And they went to look in early September 1970. They went to look at a large burnt circular patch in a field on the cliff tops at Flamborough, where people claim a flying saucer had landed. And so can we connect it to a lightning that crashed on September 8th, 1970? Of course we can't, because there's nothing to connect A to B. But it's interesting nonetheless, isn't it? This alleged light flying saucer. What makes it even more interesting is, because I've used his real name, Dean Bolton. He's going to allow us to film him. I've already filmed him, but my camera work was so crap, people, that we've got to film him again. But that's the truth of it. So we're going to film him again. But Dean said the farmer, who I won't name, even though he's not with us anymore. The men in suits from the MOD came and made him plough the field out. So if there was nothing to it, why would that happen? You know, I just find all of these things absolutely intriguing. September 8th, 1970, probably one of the most amazing potential UFO cases out there. Yeah,
well, actually, I was going to ask you about the Wilsthorpe case, and we'll get on to that. We'll just have to answer this question or this comment, really. About the noises being from underground, and obviously you guys have heard the noises up there from underground, and from a lot of these places around the world, people hear these noises underground, and that's what fascinates me about Hollow Earth and the Inner Earth. And we've got a researcher coming on here in the first week in March, a really good guest. I'll not say his name just yet. We'll announce it nearer the time. But so that'll be a brilliant episode to tune in for, the Inner Earth, Hollow Earth theory. Absolutely. Because I know you guys everybody's fascinated with that, and it involves all the phenomena. If you think about it, I mean, where are the big cats? Are they in the mines, in the caves? Where UFOs under the water, in these caverns, going inside mountains? These noises from underground bases, cryptids. Bigfoot. I mean, all of it. There's definitely so mysterious, that Inner Earth subject. Anyway, yeah, we're back. I was going to ask you about Wilsthorpe because you wanted to talk about it, didn't you?
Well, just briefly. Obviously, I think it was September.
If they don't know, mate, tell people about Wilsthorpe. Actually,
Wilsthorpe is probably. I'm sat in Bridlington. I'm in Bridlington's little seaside town now. So if you're not familiar with it, just Google it. And about 3 miles down the coast is Wilsthorpe, and there's nothing there. There's 4 blocks of 4. There's 16 flats that were built in 1935 by the MOD, I think, and they sit on the edge of the North Sea. There's nothing at the back of them. There's a boat compound which is run by the yacht club. If it sounds exotic, you forget about that. It's a corrugated sheet building and the catamarans. Not that these guys don't have a great time, but that's when it said the yacht club. You're not looking at some marina.
Yeah, it's not Miami, is it?
So back in 2009, I would have said it was the most prolific year, barring 1998, that I've ever looked into for UFO reports, and there were a steady build-up. And when I wrote the first book, the first truth proof book, I've said this before, but newspaper put an article in for me saying I were after stories of strange and unusual. And this couple from Wilsthorpe, the 16 flats, as I've said, some of them are just holiday homes. So there might have only been 4 or 5 occupied all year round.
Right.
And when I say they're on the edge of the sea, if you went to the bottom of their garden at high tide, you can throw a stone into the sea. That's how close they are. There's nothing there in front of them. That's fabulous. The elderly couple contacted me. And I went and spoke to them, spent time with them, not just once, many times. And basically, I managed to pin the date down. They couldn't remember the date. They knew it was 2009. The usual thing, you guys are exactly the same. You'll have a procedure where you sort of, when you go to bed on a night, you check doors are locked, you do this, you do that. There's a little porch outside the property, and it's got one outside light that serves 2 flats. So occasionally next door might leave light on. It makes sense in a minute. So the elderly lady went to lock up, husband went to bed. And she says, I'll just go and lock up. And she sort of went, locked the door, and then turned to come in, and then thought, oh, it lights on. But it weren't apparent at first because that's because it weren't on, but it was somehow illuminated. Right. So as she stepped over the threshold from the little porch into the living room, she said a voice in her head said, go back and have another look. So she went back and had another look. She said, and I couldn't believe it. Over the sea, there's a circle of these boomerang-shaped objects. And then there's a circle of them. And this is, if you've read the book, don't cane me on this one, people, but I think she said it were about 10 to 11 or 10 past 11. 10 to springs to mind. She said, I shouted my husband, and I'll not say his name, but he come running through. He says, and he's looking at them. She says, and it just looked like some kind of Christmas trimming over at sea. And all the sea's alive like a boiling pan of water, and there's electric coming from it, like sparks and flashes, and there's this circle of boomerangs. And her husband looked at them for a short while, and he said he frightened him, and he went to bed. He said he pulled the pillow over his head, and he didn't want to think about it. And I said to the old lady, I said, what did you do? She said, I wanted to watch them. Never seen anything like it. I'm never going to see it like it again. They weren't holiday home people. They'd lived there decades by then. They've got binoculars on the window ledge. So you're not going to say, oh, they were mistaken. It probably an helicopter just doing on exercise. They knew what they were looking at, and they spent years viewing the sea. She says, and then over the course of the next hour, they'd just disappear in pairs until there were just one over the sea. And that one just disappeared. And then she went to bed, obviously, and I got to know the story. The neighbours knew about it, spoke to alt neighbours, and they all remember her talking about it and everything else. When I say alt neighbours, there was a guy called Mick Baxter who lived next door to her. I'm not going to say old lady's name, but I don't mind saying Mick because I know Mick well. And there's another guy who works the market, actually, in Bridlington, and I asked him, he remembers them talking about it. Anyway, where am I going with it? What am I doing here? We're talking about, the very next day, I needed to get a date because they couldn't remember the date. So as I'm going through archive in 2009, it said visitors spot lynx in Bridlington. So I thought, I've got a big cat report. Brilliant. And it were lynx helicopters. And the very next day, everybody, including the Coast Guard and the lifeboat, were surprised when lynx helicopters just flew up the beach, and Chinooks. And they landed on the beach, and the yacht club porter cabin, their cabin, was requisitioned by the military. How do I know this? Because my son-in-law were in compound that day, we messing about with his catamaran, and they had to leave, so they'd had no forewarning of it. And then I think it was for 2 nights then that it were cordoned off the beach. Spoke to a witness today, believe it or not, seriously today, called Mike, when I went to get some materials for this job I'd been doing. And I knew about it. Linny had put me in touch with him years ago, and I just bumped into him today because he works at the timber yard. And I'm going to speak to him next week. And he got turned away on beach and that. He didn't see anything. He knew about the triangles that had been seen entering the sea. The guy who employed the bait diggers, because it's long, flat beach, Wilsthorpe, and shallow. And his men who he employed, the bait diggers, claimed that they'd seen triangles entering the sea during that weekly period. And the bait
triangles. Sorry, Paul. Triangles or pyramids?
Triangles, black triangles. But I know we're talking about boomerang-shaped objects, but that's what Rob were telling me. Now, what's interesting, he tells you this story, and he's really sort of broad Yorkshire. He said you can put chesties on, and he means chest waders. And you can wade out a long distance there. He says, so it weren't deep enough where my lads had said they'd seen these triangles going in. It weren't even deep enough. So he's even trying to contradict his own story, where they'd gone in. But anyway, his bait diggers got apprehended by military on beach, marched off the beach because they went down. The tides dictate when you're going to dig for these worms, what people want for fishing. So obviously, if it's night time and you're going to dig for them with an head torch, that's when it is. So they got apprehended and taken off the beach. So the military came the day after the elderly couple had seen the triangles. I put a freedom information request in. I got probably the bog standard response. I got the exact same response that Kaz Clark got for Penturk. And this is as big as Penturk. The only difference is Penturk. No, and we need to get Kaz Clark on. But the only difference with Penturk is she's invested everything in that story. I could do the same with this one. I could say, people have said, why don't you look more into Hummonby? Because I've said if I did Hummonby, I won't be able to do anything else because there's that much. It's so complex, and Wilsthorpe's the same. So a bit convoluted there, people. But yeah, Wilsthorpe. I mean, while we're on with it.
Is that Barry Lyles? Is Barry Lyles?
Barry Lyles, yeah. 4th of August 2009. There were a build-up. You got fireballs above Scarborough Castle reported in Scarborough Evening News. That was 24th of August. 30th of August, Scarborough Evening News. Holidaymakers see oval shape above orange oval shape above Caton Bay. 30th of August again. Retired fisherman sees a row of 6 lights off Flamborough Head. 30th of August again. Mystery helicopters seen flying around Scarborough Castle, same place where fireballs were seen around Scarborough Castle on 24th. It's interesting, but Barry Lyles is even more interesting. I got to talk to Barry. He holidayed at Hunmanby for years. He'd brought his family up in Tomanby for their holidays, and obviously when they'd grown and doing their own thing, husband and wife still came. And I realise, people, if you're not familiar with these locations, you're going to have to Google them. But Hummonby is very close to Filey, but it's just a little bit inland. So husband and wife decided they were going to go to Filey for a Chinese a meal. And they'd had the meal. It's night time. They'd get a taxi to bring them back. And so Barry sat in front, taxi drivers obviously driving, and wife in back. And they're just coming up to junction to Hummonby at the side of the pub. I can't remember the name of the pub. And Barry says, and he's really broad Yorkshire from Barnsley, he says, I thought it were an owl at first. He says, and he saw this huge white thing that seemed to be coming towards the window. He says, and taxi driver froze and stopped. He says, and it were just there. And he says it were like the bow, is it the body of a huge ship. He says it were cream, and we watched the underside of it just going by. So he says it looked like it were going to hit chimney pots at pub. And the pub's got some, I think there might be Airbnbs, I'm not certain, but it was lit up in the little courtyard of the side of the pub. He says, and when it went over that, he says it all illuminated. He says, and you could see this thing, and a huge craft that they'd seen. He says, and Barry's own words, he says, I could have hit it with a barge pole. He's touched it. He says, it was that low. Taxi driver wouldn't go home. She had to get somebody else to bring her back. It frightened the taxi driver back. I contacted him. She refused to speak to me. It really, really affected that person. And if you are interested still and listening, get in touch.
What shape was the craft?
Like a boat, like a huge hull of a boat, all cream and rippling. He said it were all rippling like material, almost like light running through it, and it was just like a huge boat. Imagine lifting a boat out of water that's cream and watching it just go through the sky. They didn't see what were above. So, and he said it was so low. He said I felt like I could have touched it with a barge pole, and so that and all these things were happening in 2009. And you'd got and I mean the night at Wilsthorpe just before the elderly couple had their sighting, I find myself, and I didn't know anything about Wilsthorpe, bearing in mind, until Free Press put that article in for me. But I knew there were a lot of activity, and I were out regularly. And myself and Pete Masters ended up on Wolds, and we're observing. It's a horrible night. It was thick with fog, so we drove back down. And there's one car behind us, all the way down, and we wanted to pull in at where there's a burger van in daytime, and literally back at Wilsthorpe Flats, probably about 3/4 of a mile away to the main road.
Yeah,
and these 16 flats, and in that pull-in. there's a van. We'd already seen one pass us on the walls with like a football on top, a black football, which I believe might have been probably a camera. Do you know what I mean? And it said police scientific investigation van. So, I mean, we didn't know it said that. We pulled up at the back of it, and I jumped out of, I were in my works van. And I jumped out of the van and looked, and it was, police scientific investigation van. Now, whether they were inside it or not, I don't know, but there were nobody in the van. And that was just parked up in the darkness. So what were they trying to investigate? It was interesting. So Wilsthorpe, fascinating. Well, and Barry Lyle's case or story is equally fascinating. Barry, if you're still interested in watching this now, please get back in touch.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Sounds amazing. Fortune, which of the conspiracy theories do you guys think are most likely to be true? Well, which ones are most likely to be false would probably be a better question.
Do you think there might be a grain of truth in a lot of what people are saying, and it gets blown out of proportion? I don't know, Chris. What do you guys think?
This is going to be controversial, but this should be a show in itself. But so I should probably say that I am not a flat earther. Just to preface this, but I think there's something other going on with the planet than what we're told. I think there's something. They're hiding something by not showing us the planet. If you think, I mean, you guys only need to dig into this subject just enough to see that there's no real photographs of Earth. Earth is not ball-shaped, as in it's not a perfect sphere. Everybody knows that. Mainstream science knows that, but yet they're still showing us this perfect sphere that we all live on. And now everybody knows that it's not that shape. So whilst I don't think the Earth is flat, I definitely think that and this could well be related to Hollow Earth or places beyond, what shall I say, known public mapped areas on the planet. I think there's something beyond. I mean, Antarctica's the obvious one, isn't it? But for many reasons, just because of the ice and the climate, it makes sense that they might only just be digging into that right now. So they may want to keep that secret. Who knows? But yeah, that's probably one of the theories that I think there's something to the Antarctica thing.
I don't really know myself, if I'm being truthful. I think it's because I just wrap myself up in my own stuff. I hardly watch any podcasts, and I've got loads of books, and I don't really read much. Do you know what I mean? It's difficult. What do people think of the Mandela effect? And I only say this. I'm a bit biased because of Laura, my youngest daughter, or our youngest daughter. Make it sound like Mary had no part in it, don't I? But she's mine.
The Immaculate Conception.
Yeah, she's mine. So because she said, and I don't know whether anybody picked up on it, but she said in one of our live streams, Les, the Truth Proof ones, probably about 4 weeks ago, she said, I spoke about something. She says, and then, well, not say 10 minutes later, because I have no idea at time span. She says, but then you said it again. And it was just a carbon copy. And I thought, I've already watched this. And I said to Laura, I said, well, let's see if anybody comments on it. Let's see if anybody else noticed it, Laura. Because it's not like Laura to come out with it like that, And we've got a lady coming on to talk about, on Truth Proof, to talk about Mandela effect. I just sought somebody out just so that, because Laura had been on about it. There's Alison, our moderator. Great to see you, Alison.
Hi, Alison. Hey, Paul, Chris. Out of all people's experience you've been told, which one would you love to have witnessed? Ooh. Wow. Go on, you go. Yeah, man, although you've probably got more to choose from.
No. I think there's loads, Alison. I suppose they say, be careful what you wish for. Because I'm not the bravest person in the world, but, some of these cryptid accounts, I'd love to, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'd love to see something like that. I really, really would. And because I've got so much faith in the witnesses that have shared these things with us, because as I say every time, they've nothing to gain in a lot of instances. And I'd love to. And Hunmanby, I mean, the three main witnesses at Hunmanby, which was, I think, August 1998 is where we think that the UFO landed. They got to see something from another world. Well, not say from outer space, from another world. All three of them saw the beings. Andy saw one. Dave saw three. The boss, that's all I'll ever call him, saw one. They saw something from another world, another sphere of existence. And, you know, the things that I saw in childhood, I don't think I'd want to see again. So why am I asking to see something from like they saw at Ummerby? It could be the same thing. I don't know. It's awesome. This is why I'm so invested in this subject. And this is why you guys have stayed with us now, and we do appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah,
I think
Crypto Steve Scarborough. Hi, Steve. Mandrake, Alison, Rivington Pie. We've done all these. Diane Farrell, Jojo. I'm sorry if we'll have forgot some names. Myself, 40 and 23. And just good to see you guys. And thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say the one I would like to see, just because I invested a lot of my time in the documentary at the time, was the reptilian stuff. Because James Bartley, if you guys are familiar with James's work, he's got a podcast called Cosmic Switchboard. Back in the day, back in the 90s, he was like one of the main guys that took the reptilian sort of encounters, and they used to do stakeouts. So they would go over a bit like, you know, paranormal investigation. So, you know, and they had one witness where this thing would be coming out of the closet at night. And it would, I mean, and you hear this a lot. It's bizarre, isn't it? I think didn't we discuss a case where a creature were coming out of the closet just a few weeks ago? Was it you?
We probably did. There's a few people come out of the closet just recently.
Yeah. Well, this is scarier than that. Doing that, I imagine that's quite scary in itself.
No, sorry, I've just spoilt your stride there. So yeah.
Well, what him and his mate, they would stay over in the night because these things typically would bother the kids. I think it was a single mum, and she was having these reptilian things were bothering the kids, and abduction and all sorts of stuff going on. And they would stay over. And one night they'd fallen asleep, and in the middle of the night he'd woken up, and he woke up to this thing, James. He woke up to it, and it cracked him, and it hit him. Actually punched him in the face. So, I mean, just imagine how terrifying that is to wake up
and punched James Bartley in the face.
Yeah. And I think this is the same case where the mum would hear the kid playing with somebody, and she never thought anything of it at the time. And then one day she walked in, and the kid were playing with this little she described it as a little Tyrannosaurus Rex type thing. And it just ran off. It squealed. It squealed and ran off into wardrobe.
I wonder what it is with. That's what we were on about. Haunted wardrobe.
That's the one. Yeah, haunted
wardrobe. I heard that twice. It was strange because it was me, a girl who comes in chat, and I hope she joins us on here. That's Linny's mum, and I think it was her grandma that had a wardrobe that they said was haunted, and things came out of it. And I think she believed that they were trying to get a little brother or older brother. I'm sorry if I've got it wrong, Ian. And then I thought, how crazy, because we'd got somebody on as a guest who claimed that they'd had a haunted wardrobe. And I thought, I've never heard of it before. And then you've got two stories like that in a week. But I wonder if you've got the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I wonder if it's just the opening. It's the potential to enter another world. I wonder if we place some kind of, I don't know, some kind of influence on the openings and the potential for things to come out of these things. You know, I wonder how much input we have in creating the phenomena or bringing it through.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, it's if you look at, you know, I think Poltergeist and the reptilian subject, you can find parallels in like movies like Monsters Inc. as an example. You know, like where they're stealing the kids' energy, the fear, but they were coming out of the wardrobe.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of little, and we know that throughout pop culture, you know, the powers that be, you know, people beyond the powers that be rather like to drop little breadcrumbs, don't they?
Well, I've got an incredible reptilian account, and I haven't got it to hand, so I'd like to give it you guys in detail. I've done it once, so I think we'll have to do it next time. we've not got a guest on. I'll do this one, but I'll just briefly tell you that this guy, I think I know he was living in New Zealand, former British citizen, and I know his brother very well, and that's how I got the account, and then I ended up speaking to him. And he was living alone in this property. Someone tells me it was a bungalow. He'd got up in night, I think, to use the bathroom, or got up in night because he felt a little bit uneasy, and he's having a look round the property. Comes back to bed, and it's a double bed he's sleeping in, and he's a big guy. He's bigger than his brother, who's 6'2". He figures with this in a moment. He says, and I'm laid in bed, and I rolled over, and suddenly I'm face to face with this reptilian creature, face to face. He says, and my initial, he says, big, horrible, menacing eyes. He says, and I just went, ah! He says, and I literally drew back, and a scream that I couldn't scream. I was that terrified. He says, and as I did that, it mimicked what I was doing, and it showed me a mouthful of teeth. And there's loads more to the story, so we'll do that either next week or week after. And I'll do it from start to finish, and because I think you guys will find it interesting. And I think he passed out, but we'll go into it in a little bit more detail. I think I would, yeah, absolutely.
You might do.
Yeah.
Yeah, 14's just asking about the film. Yeah, look, just if you 14, if you just type in Alien Reptilian Legacy on YouTube, you can watch it on there.
Is that your film?
The name.
Is
yeah,
that
my
your
film. The original film was called Don't Mention the Reptilians, but they wanted to change it.
And you interviewed David Icke for that film, did you?
Yeah, David. Well, I've met David many times.
Yeah.
David, James Bartley, Pierre Sabak's in the second one that is in production at the minute, and obviously your mate Simon Parks was in it in the first one as well.
In the first one, were he?
Yeah.
Not really my mate. I know him. No, I know him. I've no axe to grind with Simon Parks, but I think he could influence people, Simon.
Yeah, there's something more to Simon Parks for sure. I thought it when I first met the guy. Always been great with me, no issues. But definitely got a charisma about the guy for sure. Something magnetic
he's
about
so
the guy.
Fluent, isn't he? As he talks, he's so fluent. If you've not watched him, see if you can find some of his stuff on YouTube. I'm not a big fan, by the way. I don't mean I dislike him. I'm just not a big fan of what he talks about. I'm not at all. But and I tell him that, you know. But,
well, generally, I think what you find with that reptilian subject is there's not a great deal of positivity coming out of it.
No.
I was contacted by a lot of people that said, Chris, you're doing a disservice here. Like, you should be featuring some of these positive cases. And I did where I could. But it's just, look, it's like you've got to go where the evidence takes you. The witness is key, and they will dictate where the story comes over. And that's pretty much how I do it. When we do the films now, that's what we do, isn't it? We let the witnesses drive our narrative.
They steer it. Yeah, they definitely steer it. And it's same with what's happening up there on them cliff tops. We've noticed that it likes dark humor. Seriously.
What we're talking about.
Well, yeah, what we're talking about. But a lot of times you'll start talking about things, and if we put it, for example, let's say we put an EMF meter. We keep them away from phones. We might put one 20 foot away. We might just so we can just see the neon lights in the darkness.
Yeah.
And it's just a green glow for an hour, 2 hours. And then you might start talking about something that's quite dark. And so sometimes it's dark humor, and sometimes it's something serious that's happened on the news that's not very nice.
Yeah.
But it erupts. And like, if people have been up there, I know there's lots of people in chat who may have been up there. There's no telegraph poles. There's no electrical systems. There's nothing there to make that happen. And it erupts into activity. And like Ian might say, says, look at that. It likes that, doesn't it? It likes what we've just been talking about. And it's weird. And we have noticed it. Or we'll say, I'm going to put that away in a minute. Just starting to rain, or there's a lot of moisture content in air. It goes off. I don't. To me, it's a form of communication. Me and Mick Park went up there, and the shorts on Truth Proof. If you want to find it, it's just some EMF not experiments, some A&F work that we did up there, and we're asking it questions and it's reacting. It's doing it. You know, I ain't got some kind of electrical device on that I'm turning on to make it do it and fool you guys. I've got it there. Phones are out of his hands. Cameras and equipment are way far away, and we're walking down with nothing, and it's doing it. It's just crazy.
You should try that. I know you've not watched it yet, but I watched Cryptic Expeditions, Land Between the Lakes. I watched that a couple of weeks ago, and I think Trey Hudson's on there for one of the sections on there. That's an interesting experiment he does. You know, he has like a lockbox. It's magnetic, and he puts like the magnetic letters in there in an order or something, anything really, in a fixed order. And then it's locked. So there's a key code to get in the box. It's all magnetic, so nothing can move. You know, you can't shake the box and move everything around. And I think that's a really good experiment. I think up there you might get some results.
It would be good. I mean, I don't know. We've talked about it before, but when you came up here a few years ago, when we were Bringing Down the Light, the documentary that we did, we used a Geiger counter, and it literally went nuts where one of these deer fatalities had been.
Yeah.
And there's nothing there to make it do it. But then when we went back again, there's nothing. It's almost like there's something playing with you. It's weird, isn't it? You know, I don't know how it works. As people in chat, have Geiger counters, nuclear radiation detectors, whatever you want to call them, EMF meters, have you had a success with them? As once you've removed all other electrical equipment away from them, have you had success with them? And do you think it's communication, or do you just think it's the outside influence of the phenomena, or do you think it's some way that it's trying to communicate with us? Maybe we're not reading it right, as in let's use them as communication tools. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, we talked about this the other month, didn't we? Where you could argue we were quite lucky. You know, I mean, both of us at the time didn't even register because we were so fixed about what it is.
The high levels of radiation.
The levels were crazy levels. You know, 450. That is very high. And we're just stood there. We're
thinking, wow, we've got a result here. My hair's still out.
Yeah, we should have been running in the other direction, but you know, we're really committed. We're willing to die for the cause.
Yeah, we're still here, but Rivington, question: what are your thoughts on why UFOs have to land? I don't know, Lee. To be honest, I mean, there's plenty of reports of seeing them landed, and some seeing their occupants. I don't know. I don't even know if we should try and second guess. I don't mean we shouldn't. You might want to, but we don't know the motives of any of these other intelligences, really. And the people that seem to have some kind of contact where they believe that they're in some kind of communicative exchange with these unknown others usually get deceived and tricked. So,
yeah, well, I think the landing's a tricky one because I think you've got to determine what it is that's landing. So, like you said, it could be a manned craft, it could be a reconnaissance drone, it could be military, it could be some sort of probe, it could be any number of reasons for it landing. I mean, you know, I think the majority of us are pretty, I think you're never 100%, but I think there's certainly some connection to the animal stuff. Seems to be. But yeah, whether that's with physical craft, I don't know about that. But I think there is, just because so many all over the States, you've seen people with craft literally taking the cattle. You can see the craft, you can see the cattle going up, you can see it. And didn't Tony Dodd investigate a case like that as well?
He did. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. I got an incredible account to follow up at Bempton of a monstrous triangle at close quarters, and the guy's coming through to tell me about it, and he saw it on a misty morning when he went down to look at the seabird colony, and a misty morning. But I'm just looking at Mandrake's question there, or thoughts. Portal opens in the wardrobe, and the wardrobe symbolizes doors or a gateway. Do you know, I wish I could have said what I've said it, but you've said it, because that's kind of where I were at with my thinking.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's a good point, because, you know, we do know that this phenomena, any which way you like it, likes the use of symbolism, and that's carried over into the, you know, some of the people behind the scenes do the same. So there is some sort of symbolic stuff going on here with language and with you name it. Axe. Alison Buttle, Paul Chris, what about those structures? Yeah.
The tree structures, Alison, and it's not just structures. And I'm not saying that people couldn't be doing it, but I've just been finding what I've called, other people have not devised a new word, but I've been saying the markers, because they're hidden in plain sight. And you see a fork of a tree, not just off the beaten path, just in the woodland, and there's lots of branches in it, in fork, and lots of branches stood up. Some of them look like they're actually fallen little saplings, and they're not. When you pull them, they're just a stem of a branch. And I've been finding loads of them. I'm kind of taking note of them. I don't mean now. It's not just switched onto it. We've seen them before, and everybody's seen what you did, a documentary or a short film on. Excuse me, sticks and stones, didn't you? And the tree structures. What are your views on them?
Well, I mean, there is something very different about what you're looking at. That's the two. It's chalk and cheese. I think me and you have discussed this many times. We're really talking about. At the time, I were talking about little structures in the woods that are clearly bushcraft.
We've got 5 minutes. You'll carry on, Chris. I'm just gonna bring a piece of a small branch that will low down and show, because the trees that we're finding are 15 to 20 foot up, and they're that thick. And they're twisted, and I'll show you what it's like.
Yeah, I think that when I was doing that, I forgot those of you guys that might have watched that video on my channel, on our channel now, the last transmission, you can see that it's called Sticks and Stones if you want to watch that. And it's really just about not necessarily debunking Bigfoot structures, but just kind of putting people straight as to what is and what isn't, and what might be and what might not be. So yeah, go on, man.
So I found 25 trees in a roughly 39 foot radius, because we took a surveyor's tape and done the measurements. They're all bent over in different positions, so they're not all facing to the right as if hit by a storm, and they've not broken. This is what's happened to them. So you've got bark and growth there, and at the other side you've got bark and growth. But something's made this happen. And this is just a thin example. The others are 3 times thicker than this up in the top. So you're not going to break them. But it's almost... Have you seen that? That's nuts, isn't it?
Would that portion of the tree be classed as dead, would you say?
I would have thought so. Absolutely. Yeah, everything below it looks alive. Obviously it can't, because it'd be like an artery that had been absolutely restricted, and your arm would die, wouldn't it? If you do you know what I mean? But I wanted to give you an example of what we're looking at when I said it were a bit like wicker. Do you see? And now you can see it. And all the 25 trees are like that.
Yeah, and I think on occasion you might say that you might come across 1 or 2 trees in a wood that size, or maybe a few more than that, where storm damage can twist the tree, but it doesn't do that.
No,
it doesn't do that. So, and look, again, you've never said exactly what you think it is. You don't know what it is.
I have no idea what it is. There's something to create that effect. Obviously, I'm sort of saying the obvious there, because I don't know what that something is. But I mean, that one will low down. That's the only one that's low down. That were about 4 foot, and you can't imagine anything being able to twist that and turn that. It's just,
especially high up as well, because
the other ones are 15 to 20 foot up, and they're that thick. They're 3 times thicker than that. I just find it fascinating.
Out of interest, I wonder if did you get any feedback from the tree specialist guy?
No, nothing yet. Nothing. I've sent Lisa the pictures. Yeah, Lisa, who's helping us, because obviously she's what's the horticulturalist, and she sent the pictures to somebody. I think is it Kew Gardens? Get their opinion. Just before we kind of wind this up, I see Linny's just saying. And sorry, Chris, did you want to add some more to trees?
No, you're right.
We need to look at the thermal footage at the bottom of the cliffs. You see, everything's so subtle and it must be happening to you guys. I don't think we're documenting half of it. We went up there Wednesday night, and I got the thermal camera out, and it's quite a rough sea. Just scanning around the bottom of the cliffs, and the water's hitting it because we're in a little bit of a cove, and we can see it there. And there's a spot at the bottom of the cliffs that is absolutely freezing cold night. Bear in mind, it's the North Sea, and it's glowing. It's glowing like absolutely like the sun, and the waves are hitting it. And as the waves are going out, as Ian, if I wish you were here to say this, it's as though the water's warm on way out, and then when the wave sort of calms a little bit, you can see the heat underneath. It's right at base of cliff. We're not trying to say, oh, there's a submarine or a UFO or a person. Just odd. And he's got it on his thermal camera. I've got it on mine. I've just been too busy. I've even downloaded footage, Ian, but I've recorded it, as you know.
Oh, sounds interesting. I'll tell you what. I've just seen in there. Have you got that print with you?
What print's that?
I want to show people that print.
Yeah. Got this.
Sorry, mate. It was my fault. I was
yesterday. Now, I'm not making any claims to what it is. It could be a human print, but I haven't got a bloody clue. I've never found a print in Dane's Dyke before like that. And I've filmed it because it were all sludge and deer prints behind it and a stream and then sludge in front of it. There was no more prints, no boot prints, no barefoot prints, just this bloody thing. So I went yesterday with some plaster of Paris and my trusty protector Wolfie, and we got a cast of it, and just nuts.
It's weird, that, isn't it?
Yeah. One more thing, because I've not touched any of it, but if you look there, it's almost like there's a little claw. I don't know if you can see it. Go on, other side. Where am I? There. You see that?
Yep. Yeah.
It's nuts. It don't make any sense.
It is odd, and like I think I said earlier, there's no, I don't know whether you guys have ever seen them prints I did. There's a video on my channel about that, on our channel about that. It's quite an old video now, but you could clearly see the arch though on the one I got. I got two actually. Well, in fact, they were all up the hill, and you could see the arch, the human arch.
Right?
Can you see the arch on that? I can't tell.
I don't know enough about feet to know even what I'm looking. Seriously, apart from I've got to. I don't know. All I know is with the DJI, I've spent some time filming behind it and in front of it, and it's really claggy, thick sludge, and all you've got in front of it are loads and loads of roe deer prints, no human footprints, no boot prints, nothing, and yet you've got this just in the middle of nowhere, and it looks like the sole of another one barefoot, and then you've got the stream, and then you've got sludge at the other side where I was stood. I'd only got walking boots on, and there's a barbed wire fence behind it, so I weren't really equipped to do anything. So the next day I came back, and I brought a little trowel. I banked it all up with clay because it was full of water, and I were hoping I was going to be able to mop it out. So that is actually the sole one, and so I think the back part of it isn't relevant. It's almost like the ball of the foot that's stepped down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see.
So that's all I've got with.
And you're going to get people saying that's a double badger print, aren't you? That's what they're going to come.
Well, if that's what it is, that's what it is.
It's not just looking at it.
It's not. No, but it's just interesting, isn't it? But I've never got a print like that ever in all the time I've been there. And I got another print years ago when we were looking for evidence on the cliff tops. I'm out of the room. I'm like, come on, come back. That's it. I'm here. And that's a huge print of some kind of dog, but it could just be a standard dog, a mastiff or something. Can you see that, guys?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like I said,
well,
it's hard to say, isn't it? Well, it's one of them. We've always said it. Unless you see
difficult.
What leaves the print, you don't know.
Because there are huge dogs. I mean, Pete Masters. People have heard me talk about Pete before. He's the electronics genius who's helping us with the 1.6 gigahertz and everything else. Mm-hmm. But he used to work on Faraday cages and other things years and years ago. And prior to that, he lived with an American Indian tribe, the Chickahominy tribe. Right. And he showed them this cast, and they said that's a timber wolf. Well, obviously we don't know, do we? It might be a mastiff, but I couldn't resist getting a cast of it.
No, and that's what you're doing while you're out there, isn't it? It's like I was out with Brett and Mick last weekend, and we spent 3-4 hours just walking up this little stream, places where no one had ever been, you know, trying to find this cat print. And we did see some prints, but they weren't cat. They looked like, but you're always going to get the odd person walking through there with a dog that jumps over the stream, you know, and so look, the mystery continues. So I think we're at the end, mate. We 2 hours flown by again.
Well, thanks for the support, guys, and staying with us. I kept looking at numbers, and for the most part, you've all stayed. So thank you very much. Don't forget, please, it's still in front of you if you're on a PC or a laptop. The like, the subscribe, it's totally free. Helps us a little bit. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if you're not watching the videos on YouTube, guys, please do. And same again, just like and just give us a bit of a lift for them. And Cactus64, thank you very much for the super chat. Yep, great. Thanks, lads. Great chat tonight. Well,
and thank you, Lorraine, for doing moderating.
Yeah, thanks to my wife, Lorraine, again on a Friday night for moderating. And we will be back again next week. Have we got a guest next week, Paul?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think we have, yeah. Daryl Denton.
Is that the 28th? That's 28th. The 28th, isn't it?
28th. So
we'll sort one out for next week. I think we'll be able to sort one out. We've got a few ideas, haven't we? And don't forget, guys, by the way, if you do have an interest in any guests in particular, drop them in the chat or email us. You know, we're always open to getting anyone on the show. And as Paul said before, if any of you guys do want to come on, you're more than welcome to come on and share your encounters with us. So again, thanks a lot. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Again tonight. And we shall see you guys next week.